Let's take a look at how to work with tables and manipulate the table styling within an HTML document. Now in this example we have a table displayed in Visual Studio Code here on the left hand side, and you can see the output of the table displayed in our browser on the right hand side. Now if we take a look at the way this table is configured, we have our table tag. We have given the table a caption with two p tags or two paragraph tags, labeling it as Figure 1 and weather prediction for May of 2016. Then we have multiple table rows with items provided for data in that table. The first row, we'll do a slight separation here just so we can visually determine that there is a bit of a difference. We take a look at TH elements within inside our TR or table row. The TH element, again, specifies that this is a table header. So the date, the day, and the temperature become header information that is displayed in bold over here on our web page. Then the remaining entries in that table are all table rows, but they're using the TD element, which is table data or data cell within the table itself. Now looking at the table, it's not really all that visually appealing. It's kind of flat looking. There's not a lot of alignment in the columns. We need a little more spacing that's in there. So what we're going to do is start to apply some styling to this table to make it a little more visually appealing. We're going to do this using cascading style sheets. Again, think of your HTML as simply displaying the layout of the page, but the styling should always be in your CSS. So what we've done is we've created a style sheet link in our HTML, and in this case we're pointing to a file called style.css. Now when you start working with CSS, naming conventions will be something that you'll run across. Some folks prefer to call these style.css, put them in a styles folder within the structure for your web application. Others may have specific CSS for tables, etc. We're just going to deal with the generic style.css, making things much easier to see and look at. So one of the first things that we want to do is step into our style sheet, and we're going to make a change. We're going to add some borders to give a little bit of style to start off with on our table. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so what we've set up here is a very simple style that we're going to apply to table, and actually this should have been the table head, and this one should be a table cell, so the TD. So the style will apply to those three elements within the document. We're going to set up a single pixel solid black border for the table. We've applied that in our CSS, but it hasn't taken place over here yet, so we'll need to refresh our browser, and we can see that now the styling has been applied. We have the border around the table. But the problem we're running into here is we've got kind of a double border going on. For some, that may be perfectly fine. We think we're okay with that double border. It looks all right, but others say, no, I want to change that a little bit. The reason it looks like a double border is because, remember, we've applied a border to the table, and we've applied a border to the table header and the table cell objects. So in order to fix that, we can actually add another style in here. And then what we do with this one here is we basically collapse the border. So we can add another style in here to help us deal with that. In this case, what we're going to do is specify that we want the border to be collapsed, and then that will reduce the number of borders that we have. This is what it looks like. All right, so we've specified that for the table, we want to collapse the border. So we're using this CSS style to do that. And when we refresh, we see that indeed we have collapsed the border. Essentially, all we've done is collapse the border around the table, but we're leaving the border around all the individual cells. So that gives us a little bit more formatting on the table. It starts to add a little more visual appeal to it, but we're not finished yet. What we're going to do next is we're going to go back to the table, and we're going to add a footer in the table, and the footer that we want to add in the table is going to give us a little bit of an average temperature rating, if you will. So let's go back and make some changes to that table. So down at the bottom, after we've finished with our final table row, in this case we're going to go ahead and we're going to add another table row, because this is where we're going to put our table footer. So we use a TR, and then we will also implement a TD. This is going to be another table data cell. And then within that, we will call that average temperature. And then we've already done the math on this here and factored out the average. It's about 70.5 degrees F. So we're going to use that for 70.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, we're not quite finished yet, and the reason I say that is if we click a refresh here, we see that we do have our average temperature row at the bottom, but it looks a little odd. It's only spanning one row, and it's kind of extended that date row or the date column a little bit. We need to change that, so we'll do that with a column span. So within the TD element, we'll put in a col span, and then within the col span, we'll tell it how many columns we want this to actually span across. Because our table has 3 columns, if we implement 3 as the column span, then we refresh our table, we can see that now it takes up the entire 3 columns. Looks as though it is only 1 column at the bottom. So we've added that little bit to our table. Now we've got this average in here. But we also want to go through the process of maybe changing how some of this visual appeal is on the table itself. First thing we want to do is maybe go back in and add some padding. And the reason we want to do that is you see that within our cells, we're kind of butted right up against the borders of the cells. So let's go back to our style sheet for a moment, and let's go ahead and add some padding before we add some other elements to this table. So we'll apply this to the TH and the TD cells, and then we'll specify the padding feature. And then within the padding, we're going to use 10 pixels just to provide a little bit of extra spacing between the border and the contents. Refresh, and we can see that our table now has that padding. It's top, bottom, left, right, so it's equally applied all the way around. There'll be other lessons where you'll talk about how to apply padding differently depending on where you want the spacing to be, either top, left, bottom, or right. But in this case, we'll leave the padding set by default at 10 pixels all the way around the table. Now, one of the things that we can also do to apply some more visual appeal to this is actually start getting into applying colors to the different aspects of the table. And one way that we can do that is to start dividing our table elements, if you will, up into more discrete components. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to start specifying different elements for the table head, the table body, and the table footer. And then we'll use the CSS to apply styling to those. So back in our table, directly underneath the caption, what we're going to do is we did this physical separation here of the lines just to show that we actually had a header row, but it wasn't kind of apparent exactly what that meant. So this time we're going to create a T-head element here. And the T-head element allows us to specify that this will become a table head or a table header. And then we can use that information to apply CSS style sheets for how we want it to look. So let's paste that in here. We'll do a little more document reformatting just so things look a little bit better. So we've applied the T-head element here to our header row. And then we're also going to apply a table body element. So we'll do a T-body. Once again, a little bit of document formatting just to make it look a little bit better. And then finally, we'll come down and we'll apply a table footer. And in this case, we'll use the T-foot. So we set up a T-foot element, and we will apply it to that table footer row, which we created initially to set up our spanning column for the average temperature values. So expand that there. We'll paste in our table footer. And so now we have 3 additional elements to this table, and then what we can do with it is start to apply styling to those elements themselves. If we go back and refresh, you can see that nothing really changes so far in the table itself and in the display that we see. But what we do want to do is apply some of those color options or the styling options to the table by using our CSS. So let's go back into the style.css file, and in here we're going to specify a specific styling for the table header and for the table footer. So we use the T-head and the T-foot classes here, and then we will set up a background color. So we're going to use the IntelliSense, which saves us a lot of typing and helps us to make sure we're using the right formatting and the proper syntax for our code. And then we're going to specify some colors. You'll also notice how when we start typing in a color, the first couple of letters, the IntelliSense built into Visual Studio Code pops up and gives us some options based on what it is that we've specified for those initial letters. Let's choose the antique white for this particular instance, and then we will close out with our semicolon. And then before we add some other color, let's go ahead and take a look at what that's done to our table. So if we do a refresh, we can see that our antique white has been applied only to the header row and to the footer row, again because we've specified those classes here. Let's go ahead and make some changes to the body now so that we can apply some color to the table body. So we use the T body, and then we'll also specify the background color. So that's the one that we want to deal with specifically again. So background color. And then in this particular instance, we'll use a slightly different color. Again, using IntelliSense, we'll use the floral white. I'll press Tab to complete that, and then put our semicolon in. Let's refresh one more time on the browser, and we can see that we have this little floral white. It's just a slight change in it, and we can see that we now have two colors. So we're getting closer to where we want to be, but one thing that we want to finally add to this table is the ability for users to look at it and kind of understand or see the different rows individually or more plainly. So we're going to set up this other functionality within our CSS file, and this is where we're going to alternate the colors that we have available in our CSS file. So what we're going to do with that is we're going to apply an alternating color to the rows. So we do that by starting off with TR, and the TR is our table row, and then we're going to say for the nth child. So again, letting IntelliSense built into Visual Studio Code help us, we say we want to use the nth child. And for each even row, so in other words, we're going to alternate, but we're going to select the even rows, which would be rows numbered 0, 2, 4, etc. What we want to do is we want to change the background color of that. So once again, we'll come in, we'll specify that background color is the property we want to change. And in this case, we'll do something called blanched almond, and then semicolon to finish that out. And then let's go and refresh and see what our table looks like now. And you can see that we have alternating rows, and those make the table a little more visually appealing, and we have the ability to distinguish one row from the other. So this is just a quick example of how to create tables within your HTML documents, and then using CSS, how to apply some styling to make your tables look a little more visually appealing inside your document.